Best of r/malicious compliance episode 75. Subscribe for Reddit videos daily. The parochial high school I went to had a written rule about no bra straps being visible. There were a few teachers who were more active than others about writing up students for this type of violation. Sometime during my junior year, a bunch of the girls looked up the chapter and verse regarding bras and boiled down to, they had to be worn and no straps could be visible to the naked eye. Seen-through clothes was acceptable. So, they did what any good parochial schoolgirls would do, they maliciously complied. All the girls that had been written up at some point started wearing black, strapless bras. Poorly, the bras were especially visible through their white and light shirts. They weren't trying to support the troops, they were just wearing the garment. Needless to say, the girls were bouncing all over, noticeably so. A bunch of their friends joined in. When asked about it, the ladies would respond with something like, "You wanna talk about my boobs? I'm not comfortable having a conversation about my breasts. You seem creepy to want to talk to me about that." That sort of thing. In the end, the administration decided to back off of enforcement efforts for that particular part of the dress code, rather than have to document so many pointedly uncomfortable conversations. Thank you. Next. About 15 years ago, I was working at a large chain electronics store while I was in university. The hours were flexible and we were paid on commission, so there was opportunity to make decent money. I was actually pretty good at it and was recognized as one of the top salesmen in my region several times. I was in the mobile audio department, a department that covered car audio, portable stereos and a brand new product, MP3 players. I remember selling MP3 players with as little as 64 megabytes of storage, basically enough for one album. It was a simpler time, a time when you would have an MP3 player and a phone. Phones had not yet achieved sentience, text messaging required a ridiculous amount of button pushing and iPods had hard drives and then this is important. A customer came into my department with her son. She was mid-40s, he was late teens. She told me that she was looking for an MP3 player for running. I didn't particularly like selling MP3 players as they were low margin items with low commission, but it was a slow day, so I was grateful for something to do and to hopefully make a few bucks. I started to show her some of the options that were available that would fit her needs well, including options with armband cases included, expandable memory, decent headphones. All of the options I presented were flash memory. Hard drives tended to dislike the jarring that accompanied jogging. At this point, her son chimed in. "Mom, you need the 80GB iPod. Don't listen to this guy." I was immediately taken aback. First of all, she absolutely didn't need the 80GB iPod. She ran for a half hour at a time and the 1 or 2GB flash MP3 players I was showing her were much more suitable for her needs and about a quarter of the cost. Secondly, at this point in time, I knew what I was talking about. I had many repeat customers come back to me for my knowledge of the products and I prided myself on being able to answer virtually any question about anything in my department. I tried to explain to the mom why this was not a great fit for her needs but was repeatedly, 3 or 4 times, cut off by her irritating son, who obviously expected to get the most use out of the iPod. I decided to cut my losses and open up the case where the iPods were kept and get one out for them. I walked them over to the till and showed them options for cases and headphones, all of which Smarty Pants' son said they didn't require. When I arrived at the till, I started to explain the extended warranty to the mom. While most of the time, it was a money grab, I'd seen enough of these come back with damaged hard drives or batteries that I actually thought it was worth buying for this product. "Don't even listen to him, Mom. He's just trying to get you to spend more money," the son loudly proclaimed as he held the box in his hands and read the specs. My wife will tell you that I'm not the most patient man, and at this point, I had no more patience in my internal reserve to call upon. I took the box out of the kid's hands and said, "Are you kidding me?" I was pointing her to products that cost hundreds of dollars less than what you are making her buy, and when I suggest something to protect the unnecessary purchase you claim that I'm trying to get more money out of her. We're done here. You can buy your iPod somewhere else. I locked it back in the case as they stood there with their mouths hanging open. Finally, Mom speaks up, her first words since we began talking. "I'd like to speak to your manager please." I half expected this, And at the time, my sales manager was pretty cool. Outside of scheduling, she basically allowed me to run the department. I trained all the new staff and learned all the new products. I got her from the office and explained the situation to her. She didn't say a word and walked with me to my department where the mom started complaining about my unprofessional behavior. My manager cut her off, saying, "I'm sorry, but we won't be able to serve you today. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the store immediately." She walked off, leaving me with a bemused grin on my face and the mom and son looking at each other in disbelief. They left the store, bitching and complaining the whole way. I thoroughly enjoyed knowing that in that case, the customer was not right. Thank you. Next. Me and my sister had a couple of her friends over yesterday. We're teenagers, so we were a little loud because we were having fun. My mom got pissed at us because we were being loud and we kind of disturbed some of our family. I backtalked a bit and ended up being told to write an essay on what it means to be a jackass. I turned around and did exactly as told. However, I wrote a bunch of examples about how she was a jackass, rather than me being a jackass. When she read it, she was pleasantly surprised and caught on kind of quickly. Ended up grounded from the essay for a day. Thank you. Next. Sweet, short and cheeky MC. I want to preface this MC by saying that my mother and I have a great relationship and this was just me following orders. Scene. Kitchen. Post-dinner wash up. Cast. Mum. Me as my smarter self. Story. Me. Filling up the sink to above halfway like I usually do. Mum. Fill it up more. I have to rewash half the dishes in the morning when you don't fill it up enough. Me. Turns tap on for half a second and turns it off again while maintaining full eye contact. Mum. Gives me a withering stare. Turn that bloody tap on until I say when. Now many readers who frequent this subreddit may have caught the glaring error my mother has just made and the subsequent path it took us down. Tap on. Me. Smirking. Mum. Distracted. Thank you. Next. Alright, so, this happened just under 2 years ago while I was living in NYC. I was /am on the younger side of what the public expects to see for a cane user, and other than having the cane I don't look disabled. Also, just because I know it's going to be asked, I have the cane because of hypermobility issues that have basically led to my joints not functioning as they should. Essentially, it helps keep me from falling randomly / overstraining my already taxed muscles. Also, those of you who have ridden on NYC subways might know this already, but every NYC subway car has seats that are designated as handicapped. These seats are to be vacated and given to anyone disabled, elderly, pregnant, injured, etc. You can definitely sit there if you aren't handicapped in some way, but it's a fine if you don't give up your seat when someone who needs it comes along. There's actually nothing other than manners forcing you to give up your seat in the rest of the train. That said, even in NYC most people tend to automatically offer up a seat when they see a cane. NYC subways are especially brutal on my condition if I have to stand. The constant, unpredictable need to shift my weight leaves my muscles in agony after even a short ride. I always tried to board by the handicapped seats, that way I at least wasn't putting someone out in the regular ones. A lot of folks will pretend not to see you but eventually they realize you caught them staring and they offer up the seat. One day I got on the A train at Columbus Circle heading north after a long day of work. The train was pretty crowded and every seat was full. A guy sitting in one of the handicapped seats saw me and jumped up. The young lady standing in front of him hadn't seen me and sat down. This happened sometimes. Women assuming they were being given the seat by a chivalrous man, but most women would see me and realize what had happened. The lady saw me just as the man gives her a WTF look. I hadn't planned on saying anything cause, I mean, invisible disabilities are a thing and I tend to freeze with confrontation anyway. But I must have had a puzzled look or something cause the lady goes, "Someone else can give you a seat." I look around. Every other handicapped seat is occupied by someone who obviously needs it, elderly, pregnant, etc. So I just say, well, they're all people who are supposed to be sitting in these seats. It's a fine if you sit here and aren't handicapped while someone who is doesn't have a seat. I was still tired and a bit startled to be pulled into a confrontation. Lady, well then it's a fine for all of them. She points to the regular seats. Me, no, just the ones with those signs. I point to the sign directly above her head declaring the seats as handicapped. Lady, well you can stand for one stop. Now, I could have probably gotten a regular seat from someone nicer than this woman. But the subway had already started moving at this point and I needed to hold on. That, and, well, I'm stubborn and petty. So I stand in the crowded car, right in front of her, my cane an inch from her kneecap for the express trip from 59th to 125th. Those of you who have experienced the joy of an express NYC subway train ride, you know they are not gentle. They speed along, bouncing, swaying, and jostling without a care in the world. I am in agony in no time flat, but I'm not the only one. Every jerk of the subway car sends my cane hard into this lady's kneecap. I don't have to intentionally do anything more than stand there. Actually I'm trying to stay as immobile as possible, but this particular operator is driving like he's late for his own wedding. She tries to shift but I really am all up in her business. Grab bar is right above her after all. We get to 125th and she tries to stand, but I don't move. She did want me to stand after all. She eventually shoves past me up out of her seat. I'm fine cause the car is too crowded for me to fall or anything, but doesn't make it out of the car in time. By that time I've gratefully taken the seat she vacated, so she has to stand until we get to 145th. At that point she got off. I assumed to get on going the other direction, and I never saw her again. Edit. I guess it's not clear in my post but I'm a woman. Dunno if that helps or hurts the mental image of events. Face with tears of joy. Thank you. Next. Wasn't sure if this was revenge or malicious compliance, but here it goes. I worked at a place that made specific types of fuel, and they wanted to be the next gen inventory system and warehousing but somehow didn't have enough money for the full support staff, so it was myself and 2 other mid-level managers and 4 mechanics keeping a 100-year-old augmented refinery running. They consistently challenged me on my service record because I was active duty and transferred to the reserves. The HR routinely told employees to throw jury summons in the trash. I had a co-worker say something to the plant manager and he ended up getting fired. He was also in the reserves and was also harassed. One day the plant manager comes into our office and demanded time cards were filed and approved by Thursday. Time cards are submitted Friday at COB stated in the company policy. I raised a concern that the time card system is ineffective as employees have to scan in to enter the facility but do not have access to see when they entered, leaving them to guess on their time cards that they manually enter. This allows them to fire at will for falsifying a time card regardless if it's true or not. Eventually I had worked my way into 2 write-ups from the management for 1 count of insubordination. I used stop work authority on a manager, and 1 of falsifying a time card. Essentially you should build that this place sucks 100% at everything. In our automated maintenance management system there was an inventory process that allowed for the total cost on hand to reflect the inventory taxes that would need to be paid to the state if it wasn't used after a year, and this appeared at the XXXX 300 Julian date of that serial number or stock item being on shelf. Management told me to get rid of that field as it was pointless because we don't pay taxes. This is not true. We pay taxes unless it's a specific grant known in California as a CAFTA code. This does not apply to inventory tax in our case. I expressed that there is a need for it and that I can add a field where you can select if it's taxable or not, and if it is taxable what the rate is and what CAFTA it falls under. I thought this brought corporate in, who sided with me, and eventually got it to stay. One day I logged in and saw the field had been removed. I asked at that maintenance meeting if anyone did anything, knowing there's only one other user that can edit forms and that's the plant manager, but we're on the same account because we can't afford more accounts, and no one said anything. So I went into the login notes and saw that on that last Friday someone at 4:43 had removed field %inv/stock % and %tax %. Ord, which is the identifier I created for that field. I got off at 3:30, so knowing what would happen I left the field absent. But in the undefinable field for CAFTA that is also now password locked I put tax des nuts. They would have to call the company to remove the password, and they won't notice it until they generate the report cause that's when it shows up. Also for warehouse consumables after they reach 6 character for cost it autofills to say don't worry we can't afford it. I was fired that Tuesday for falsifying a time card and got a call like 4 months later from one of my co-workers for corporate that expressed a great interest on how to remove the tax des nuts. I responded with I don't know, the boss is the only one who can make changes like that. and I don't work there anymore. Thank you. Next. It's wet season again, and this wet season has reminded me of the glorious time my old real estate fucked up bad because of the wet season. No lollygagging here. Straight into the story. Where I live in Central Coast QLD, the wet season is up and down. Sometimes it's dry and other times it floods. I also happen to live in a swampy area, so even a small amount of rain leaves most of the ground soggy. My partner and I had been in the rental for 6 months with the wet season turned on. Full force of rain for weeks. I couldn't walk through the backyard because I would sink. The front yard wasn't so bad, thankfully. I was able to somewhat maintain the front lawn, keeping the grass looking good and hedges trimmed. I thought I could leave the backyard and pay for someone to do it once the ground dried up, but the real estate agent did not like it at all. In my lease it said that the ground could not be left marked upon exiting the premises, so I didn't even park my car on the grass ever. The real estate agent must have taken a peek and seen the just past ankle length grass and emailed me furiously about how I needed to trim it. I tried explaining that the ground was too wet and I or anyone else wouldn't be able to push a mower through it. Real estate agent, I don't care if you say the ground is wet and you can't push a mower. Hire a ride-on and cut the damn grass. There was some back and forth with me trying to explain the ground and sinking situation, but Rhea was having none. So I booked someone to come do the backyard on a ride-on. As expected, the ride-on left trenches and it completely ruined the grass. I'm not talking little marks through the grass. I'm talking someone could have used the trenches to do a flip on a bike. The grass was squashed. The mud was everywhere. It stunk because everything was unsettled and it was a massive eyesore. There was no way for me to fix it by the time the lease ended because the grass would still look like shit. I got some photos and sent it through to the Rhea letting them know the grass was cut. After one furious phone call with me, Rhea explaining the whole situation, I've never been pushed to mow grass while the ground is wet.